After I became a millionaire, the lawyer showed me the document with my married name. My name is Elena Rousseau. I own Rousseau Atelier, a luxury interior design firm with offices in Manhattan and the Hamptons. I've dressed the homes of tech founders, old money families, and celebrities who value discretion over display. But that afternoon in the lawyer's office, surrounded by mahogany panels and the scent of leather-bound books, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was staring at a name I hadn't seen in 12 years. The envelope had arrived at my office that morning. Cream-colored, expensive stock. My address written in fountain pen. Inside, a single sentence. "There's something you need to know about the Harrison estate. Please come alone." It was signed by Thomas Brennan, a name I didn't recognize but whose letterhead carried the weight of Fifth Avenue legal prestige. Now I sat across from him, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and careful hands, watching as he slid a document across his desk. The paper was old, edges slightly yellowed, but the words were clear. Elena Marie Harrison. Not Rousseau. Harrison. My maiden name had been Moreau. I'd never been Elena Harrison. Never used that name. Never signed it. Never even heard it spoken aloud. "I don't understand," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Mr. Brennan folded his hands. "Mrs. Harrison, or Ms. Rousseau, if you prefer, this document is part of an estate we've been managing for over a decade. There are complications, and you're named as a primary beneficiary." The office suddenly felt too warm. Outside, Manhattan hummed with its usual Tuesday afternoon chaos. But in here, time had stopped. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. I'd worked so hard to build my life. Every corner of my penthouse in Tribeca reflected that work. The Carrara marble, the custom millwork, the view of the Hudson that cost more than most people earn in a lifetime. I'd designed it all myself. Every detail a testament to control, to precision, to knowing exactly who I was and what I'd built. But this document suggested something else entirely. A life I didn't remember. A marriage that never happened. Or did it? "I've never been married," I said quietly. "And I certainly wasn't married to anyone named Harrison." Mr. Brennan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Ms. Rousseau, I understand this is confusing, but the signatures are legal, the dates are verified, and there's a considerable amount of money involved." My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my Hermes bag, feeling the smooth leather, grounding myself in something real, something I could touch and know was mine. "How much money?" $38 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. I was already wealthy. My business had made me that. But this was different. This was money tied to a name I'd never used, a past I couldn't access, a version of myself that apparently existed in legal documents but nowhere in my memory. "Who was he?" I whispered. "This Harrison?" "Mr." Brennan opened a folder, but before he could speak, I felt it. That strange pulling sensation in my chest, like a door opening onto a room I'd kept locked for years. A room I didn't even know existed. And somewhere in the back of my mind, beneath the shock and confusion, a single thought emerged. What if I already know the answer? I left the lawyer's office with the document folded inside my bag, its presence burning against my hip like a brand. The city moved around me, tourists with cameras, businessmen on phones, the eternal symphony of horns and sirens. But I felt separate from all of it, wrapped in a silence that belonged only to me. My driver was waiting on Madison Avenue, but I waved him off. I needed to walk, needed the October air against my face, the bite of wind that reminded me I was real, that this moment was happening. I'd built my entire identity on clarity, on knowing exactly what I wanted and how to get it. At 37, I had the career I dreamed of since I was 22, sketching room layouts in a cramped studio apartment in Astoria. I had the penthouse, the reputation, the client list that made competitors jealous. I had control, but control required memory, and there was a gap in mine, wide and dark as a canyon. By the time I reached my building, the afternoon light had turned golden, pouring between the skyscrapers like honey. My doorman nodded as I passed. The elevator carried me up in its familiar hush. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. Except it wasn't. Inside my apartment, I dropped my bag on the console table and moved to the windows. The Hudson stretched below, silver and endless. I designed this space to feel like a sanctuary, all cream and taupe and soft gray, textures that whispered rather than shouted. No clutter, no chaos. Everything in its place. I pulled the document from my bag and unfolded it on the marble island in my kitchen. Elena Marie Harrison. The signature looked like mine. The slant of the letters, the way the E curled slightly at the top. But I didn't remember signing it. Didn't remember the date. June 14th, 12 years ago. Didn't remember being in the office of a justice of the peace in Greenwich, Connecticut. 12 years ago, I'd been 25. Working 80-hour weeks at a firm in Midtown, barely making rent, living on coffee and ambition. There hadn't been time for marriage. There hadn't been time for anything except work. Or had there been? I poured myself a glass of wine, a Sancerre I'd been saving, and carried it to my study. The room was smaller than the others, more intimate, lined with shelves holding design books and fabric samples. My laptop sat on the desk, closed and waiting. I opened it and typed, James Harrison, Greenwich, Connecticut. The search results filled the screen. An attorney, graduated from Yale Law, partner at a firm specializing in estate planning and trusts. A photograph showed a man in his early 40s now, handsome in that understated way. Certain men wear wealth, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that looked intelligent and kind. I didn't recognize him. But something stirred in my chest when I looked at his face. Not recognition, exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like the ghost of an emotion I couldn't name. I scrolled further. There were mentions of charitable work, a few legal articles he'd written, a photograph from a gala 3 years ago where he stood beside an elegant woman in emerald silk. The caption identified her as his wife. His wife. So he'd remarried, moved on. Built a life that clearly didn't include a woman named Elena Rousseau, who claimed to have no memory of ever being Elena Harrison. I closed the laptop and walked back to the windows. The sun was setting now, turning the sky pink and orange, painting the river in shades of fire. Beautiful, expensive, empty. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant. Confirming your meeting with the Whitmore clients tomorrow at 10. They're excited to see the final renderings. I stared at the message. The Whitmores. A penthouse renovation in the West Village. $3 million budget. The kind of project that used to thrill me. Now it felt like background noise. I picked up the document again, running my finger over the signature. My signature. Or a version of myself I couldn't access. A 25-year-old Elena who'd walked into a justice of the peace's office in Greenwich and signed her name beside a man named James Harrison. Why can't I remember you? I whispered to the empty room. And then softer, the question that frightened me more. What else did I forget? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my study with a glass of wine that went warm and untouched, staring at the document until the words blurred. The apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the city, a sound I usually found comforting, a reminder that life continued, that the world moved forward whether I was ready or not. But tonight, that sound felt like accusation, By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them. My mother lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, a place I'd helped her buy 5 years ago when my business finally took off. She'd raised me alone after my father left when I was 3, worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything so I could have the education she never did. She was proud of what I'd become. She told me so every time I visited. But as I stood on her stoop that Wednesday morning, finger hovering over the doorbell, I wondered what she'd really kept from me. She answered wearing her reading glasses and a cashmere cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. Her face lit up the way it always did when she saw me, then immediately shifted to concern. "Elena, what's wrong?" I'd never been good at hiding things from her. We sat in her kitchen, the same one where I'd done homework at the table while she made dinner after her shifts. The morning light came through lace curtains, softening everything, making the moment feel almost gentle. I slid the document across the table. She didn't touch it, just looked at it, her expression going carefully blank in a way that told me everything. "You knew," I said quietly. My mother removed her glasses and set them beside her coffee cup. Her hands were steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like someone preparing for impact. "I knew you wouldn't remember," she said finally. The words hung between us, sharp and irreversible. "What does that mean?" My voice was harder than I intended. "How could I not remember being married?" She stood and moved to the window, her back to me. Outside, Brooklyn Heights was waking up. Neighbors walking dogs, cars searching for parking, the ordinary rhythm of life. But in this kitchen, the world had tilted. "You were sick," she said. "That summer. Do you remember that?" I did, actually. Fragments. Being in a hospital. White walls and the smell of antiseptic. Headaches that felt like my skull was cracking. Doctors with concerned faces asking me questions I couldn't answer. "They said it was viral meningitis," I said slowly. "It was." My mother turned to face me. "You were in the hospital for 2 weeks. You almost died, Elena. And when you woke up, there were gaps. My hands had gone cold." "What kind of gaps?" 6 months, maybe 7. The doctor said it happens sometimes. The fever, the inflammation, it can affect memory formation. They said you might never get those months back. I stood, needing to move, needing air. "And you didn't think to tell me I'd been married during those months?" "You were 25 years old, lying in a hospital bed, asking me why your head hurt and when you could go back to work. You didn't remember James. Didn't remember the wedding. Didn't remember any of it." Her voice cracked slightly. "What was I supposed to do? Give you more pain when you were already struggling to survive? You were supposed to tell me the truth." "The truth?" She shook her head. "The truth was that my daughter almost died. The truth was that when you woke up, you had a chance to start over, to not be tied to something you couldn't even remember." James understood. He signed the papers. He let you go. I gripped the counter, trying to steady myself. "He let me go? What does that even mean?" My mother's eyes were wet now, but she didn't look away. "It means he loved you enough to not force you to stay in a marriage you couldn't remember. It means he gave you your freedom." The kitchen felt too small suddenly, too full of revelations I wasn't ready to hold. "There's money," I said. $38 million. In an estate with my married name on it. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "I didn't know about that. But you know something." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I know that he called, once, about 3 years after you'd recovered. Asked how you were, if you were happy. I told him you were building a business, that you were thriving. He said that was all he needed to know. I felt something crack inside my chest, not quite breaking, but fracturing. A hairline split in the foundation I'd built my entire life upon. I need to see him, I whispered. My mother nodded slowly. I thought you might. I left her house with more questions than I'd arrived with, but at least now I knew the shape of what I'd forgotten. 6 months. An entire marriage compressed into a gap in my memory, as if it had never existed at all. Except it had existed. And somewhere in Greenwich there was a man who remembered everything I'd lost. The thought terrified me. But more than that, and this was what I couldn't admit to my mother, couldn't even fully admit to myself. I was beginning to understand why part of me had always felt incomplete. Why no relationship had ever quite fit. Why I'd built a career around creating perfect spaces for other people while my own life remained carefully, precisely empty. Maybe I'd been missing something all along. Maybe I'd been missing someone. I didn't call ahead, didn't rehearse what I'd say. On Thursday morning, I canceled my meetings, got in my car, and drove to Greenwich. The address Mr. Brennan had given me led to a colonial-style house on a tree-lined street where autumn had painted everything in shades of amber and rust. The kind of neighborhood where families lived, where children rode bikes and couples planted gardens, and life unfolded in the slow, steady way I'd never allowed myself to want. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching the house, wondering what kind of man lived behind those windows, wondering what version of myself had loved him. Finally, I got out. The walkway was brick, lined with mums and terracotta pots, details I would have noticed as a designer, appreciating the thoughtfulness, the care. Now they just felt like obstacles between me and the truth. I rang the doorbell. Footsteps. Then the door opened, and I was looking at James Harrison for the first time, or the first time I could remember. He was taller than I'd expected from the photographs. The gray at his temples was more pronounced in person, and there were lines around his eyes that spoke of years I hadn't been part of. But those eyes, dark brown, careful, intelligent, they looked at me with something that made my breath catch. Recognition. And beneath it, something that looked like grief. Elena, he said quietly. Just my name. But the way he said it, like a word he'd held in his mouth for years, saving it, keeping it safe, made my chest tighten. I'm sorry, I managed. I should have called, but I needed to. I don't know what I needed. I just came. He stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. His house was beautiful in an understated way. Warm woods and built-in shelves, art that looked collected rather than curated. A home, not a showpiece. I'd designed dozens of spaces like this for clients, but I'd never created one for myself. We sat in his living room, and the silence stretched between us, full of 12 years and 6 missing months, and a marriage I couldn't remember. You look exactly the same, he said finally, and completely different. I don't remember you, I said, because there was no point in pretending. I don't remember any of it. I know. His voice was gentle. Your mother told me, after you got sick. Why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you try to make me remember? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. Because you were 25 years old, Elena. You'd almost died. You had dreams, this incredible career you were building. And I was 30, established. I had everything I needed except the one thing I wanted most. He paused. You. But we were married. We were married for 4 months, and they were the best 4 months of my life. His eyes met mine, and I saw it there, the truth of what we'd been. But I couldn't keep you in a marriage you didn't remember choosing. That wouldn't have been love. That would have been selfishness. My throat burned. So you just let me go? I let you be free. He stood and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a small wooden box. When he returned, he set it on the coffee table between us. But I kept these, just in case you ever came back. I opened the box with shaking hands. Inside were photographs. Me at 25, younger, softer, wearing a simple white dress and holding wildflowers. James beside me in a gray suit, both of us standing in front of a justice of the peace in what must have been Greenwich. My smile in the photo was radiant, unguarded. The smile of a woman who'd never learned to protect herself. There were other photos too. Us at a farmer's market, walking on a beach, sitting in a restaurant, my hand covering his across the table. In every image, I looked happy. Not the controlled, polished happiness I'd perfected over the years, but something raw and real and entirely undefended. I don't understand, I whispered. How did we even meet? You came to my office. Your design firm was handling an estate, one of my clients. We needed to coordinate on the property. You were brilliant, funny. You talked about spaces like they were living things, like you could see what they wanted to become. He smiled, but it was edged with sadness. I fell in love with you before the meeting was even over. And I loved you back? You did. He pointed to one of the photos, us on a porch swing, my head on his shoulder. You said you'd never felt safer with anyone. That I made you believe you could have both things, the career and the love. That you didn't have to choose. I touched the photo, feeling its glossy surface, proof of a life I'd lived and lost. What happened? Why did I get sick? We were planning a trip to Paris. You'd always wanted to go. But you started getting headaches, said you felt off. Within a week, you were in the hospital. His voice roughened. I sat beside your bed every day, held your hand while you slept. And when you woke up and looked at me like a stranger, He stopped, collecting himself. I realized I'd been given an impossible choice. Keep you and watch you struggle to remember a love you couldn't access, or let you go and hope you'd find happiness anyway. That's not fair, I said, and I wasn't sure if I was talking to him or the universe or the virus that had stolen 6 months from my memory. No, he agreed. It wasn't fair to either of us. I looked at the photos again, trying to find that woman, trying to feel what she'd felt. But there was nothing. Just images of a stranger who wore my face and loved a man I didn't know. The money, I said. The estate. What is it? James's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. That's complicated. Everything about this is complicated. My father died 2 years ago. When we were married, he put certain assets in a trust. Your name was on it, Elena Harrison. I didn't even know until the lawyers started settling the estate. By then, you'd built your whole life as Elena Rousseau. I didn't want to disrupt that. $38 million is a disruption. It's also rightfully yours. You were my wife. Under Connecticut law, you're entitled to it. I stood abruptly, needing space, needing air. I don't want money from a marriage I can't remember. I don't want to be someone's widow when I don't even remember being someone's wife. You're not a widow. His voice was firm. I'm still here. And that simple statement, broke something open inside me. Why? The word came out broken. Why are you still here? You remarried. The photos online. Those photos are from my sister's wedding. I've never remarried Elena. I've never even tried. The room was too small. The truth was too large. That's not possible, I said. It's been 12 years. I know how long it's been. He stood too, And we were close now. Close enough that I could see the pain he'd been carrying, the weight of loving someone who'd forgotten him entirely. You think I didn't try? I dated. I went through the motions. But every woman I met, I compared to you, to those 4 months when I had everything. Stop, I whispered. Please stop. Why? Because it's too honest? Because it makes this real? Because I can't give you what you want? The words exploded out of me. I can't remember. I can't be that woman in the photos. I don't even know who she was. James was quiet for a long moment. Then, softer. I'm not asking you to be her. I'm just asking you to understand that she existed. That what we had was real, even if you can't access it anymore. I grabbed my bag, suddenly desperate to leave, to get back to my carefully controlled life where the past stayed buried and the future was something I could design. I need to go. Elena, I'm sorry. I moved toward the door, blinking back tears. I'm sorry I can't be what you remember. I'm sorry I forgot. I'm sorry for all of it. He didn't try to stop me, just stood there in his living room, surrounded by the life he'd built without me, and watched me leave. Again. I made it to my car before the tears came, sat in the driver's seat with my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, crying for a marriage I couldn't remember, and a man who'd loved me enough to let me go, and the 6 months of my life that existed only in photographs and someone else's memory. And underneath all of it, the confusion, the anger, the grief, was a question I was terrified to answer. What if I could love him again? I drove back to Manhattan in a daze, the photographs from James's box sitting in my passenger seat like passengers from another life. He'd let me take them. Insisted, actually, saying they belonged to me more than they belonged to him. Maybe they'll help, he'd said as I stood in his doorway, eyes red and mascara smudged. Maybe they won't. But they're yours either way. Now they sat beside me, proof of something I couldn't feel. Back in my penthouse, I spread them across my dining table. 12 photographs documenting 4 months of a marriage I'd lived but couldn't access. I studied them like artifacts from an archaeological dig, searching for clues about who I'd been. The woman in these photos was softer than I was now, less polished. In one image, she wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, laughing at something off camera. No designer clothes, no careful styling, just a woman in love, unafraid to be seen without armor. I picked up my phone and dialed before I could stop myself. My mother answered on the second ring. Did you see him? Why didn't you tell me what I was like? Before? She was quiet for a moment. What do you mean? I gestured at the photos even though she couldn't see them. I look happy. Really happy. Not the way I am now, controlled and measured and always thinking 3 steps ahead. I look free. You were, my mother said softly. You'd always been so driven, so focused on building your career. But that summer you softened. You let yourself want something besides success. I sank onto my sofa, still holding a photo of myself on a beach, barefoot in the sand, James's arm around my waist. Was I different with him? You were yourself, maybe the most yourself I'd ever seen you. She paused. That's why it was so hard to watch. When you woke up in that hospital and didn't remember him, you reverted back to who you'd been before. Ambitious, guarded, afraid to need anyone. It was like watching you unbecome something beautiful. The words hit me like a physical blow. Why are you telling me this now? Because you're asking. And because maybe it's time you knew that the person you've been for the last 12 years, successful, independent, in control, she's real. But she's not the only version of you that exists. That woman in those photos, she was real too. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, too tired to turn on lights. The city glittered outside my windows, millions of lives unfolding in apartments and offices and restaurants, each person carrying their own wounds, their own lost memories, their own questions about who they might have been. I thought about James sitting in his house in Greenwich, surrounded by a life he'd built in the shadow of our 4 months. 12 years of carrying a love I couldn't remember. 12 years of letting me be free while he remained tethered to something I'd forgotten. It wasn't fair, to either of us. Over the next few days, I couldn't focus. The Whitmore project sat neglected on my desk. My assistant sent increasingly concerned emails. Clients called, wondering about delays. But I couldn't make myself care about marble samples and paint colors when my entire understanding of myself had cracked open. On Saturday, I did something I never did. I called my assistant and told her I was taking a week off. Then I got in my car and drove north. No destination in mind, just needing to move, to think, to exist outside the carefully designed box I'd built around my life. I ended up in the Berkshires, at a small inn I'd never heard of, run by a woman in her 70s who asked no questions and showed me to a room with wide pine floors and windows that looked out on rolling hills painted in autumn colors. For 3 days, I did nothing. Walked in the woods, sat by a lake. Let my mind unspool without forcing it into neat, controlled thoughts. And slowly, carefully, I let myself acknowledge the truth I'd been avoiding. I was terrified. Not of James, not of the marriage I couldn't remember, but of what it meant if I allowed myself to feel something for him now. Because if I did, if I let myself fall for a man who already knew every version of me, who'd loved me when I was unguarded and let me go when I was lost, what would that say about the life I'd built, the person I'd become? Would it mean the last 12 years had been a waste, a lesser version of a life I could have had? Or would it mean I'd simply been on a different path, and now those paths were converging again? On my last morning at the inn, I sat on the porch with coffee, and finally let myself look at the question I'd been circling. Do I want to know what we could be now? Not what we were. That was gone, lost to a virus and a gap in my memory that would never close. But what we could become. 2 people who'd loved each other once and lost each other and somehow found their way back to this moment, standing at a threshold neither of us had expected to reach. The answer terrified me, but it was yes. I drove back to Manhattan that afternoon, but I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Brooklyn Heights and sat with my mother in her kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd told me the truth just days ago. I think I need to try, I said quietly. She reached across the table and took my hand. Try what, sweetheart? To see if I can love him, not remember him. I know that's probably impossible, but to see if the person I am now can love the person he is now. Her eyes filled. Oh, Elena, is that crazy? To try to build something with someone who remembers a version of me I can't access? I don't think it's crazy, she said. I think it's brave. That night, back in my penthouse, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys for a long moment before I started typing. James, I'm not ready to remember. I don't know if I ever will be. The doctors said those months are probably gone forever, locked behind damage I can't undo. But I'm starting to think that maybe that's okay. Maybe trying to reclaim what we were is the wrong goal. What if instead, we tried to discover what we could be? Not the 25-year-old who loved you without fear, and not the 30-year-old who let you go. But the person I am now, 37, successful, guarded, and terrified of needing anyone. And you, not the man who saved those photographs and carried our 4 months like a torch, but the person you've become in 12 years of living without me. I don't know if it's possible to fall in love with someone twice. Once in a life I can't remember, and once in a life we'd have to build from nothing. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. Elena, I read it 3 times, my heart pounding before I hit send. Then I sat in the dark, surrounded by the life I'd built so carefully, and waited to see if the man I'd forgotten could help me become someone new. James's response came the next morning. Not an email, a phone call. I was in my kitchen, coffee in hand, staring at the river and trying to pretend I wasn't waiting. When my phone rang and his name appeared on the screen, my breath caught. "Hello," I said, and hated how uncertain I sounded. "I'd like to take you to dinner," he said without preamble. "Tomorrow night. Not in Greenwich, not in Manhattan. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere we've never been." "Okay," I whispered. "Elena?" His voice softened. "Thank you for being willing to try." We hung up, and I stood in my kitchen feeling like I was standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable. The life I'd built, controlled, successful, safe, suddenly felt like a room I'd been living in with all the curtains drawn. And now someone was offering to open them. The question was whether I was brave enough to let the light in. I chose my outfit carefully for dinner, a silk dress in deep emerald, elegant but not formal. Understated jewelry. My hair loose rather than the severe bun I usually wore for business. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I realized I was trying to find a middle ground between the polished professional I'd become and the softer woman in those photographs. James had chosen a restaurant in Cold Spring, a small town along the Hudson about an hour north of the city. When I arrived, he was already there, standing outside, hands in his pockets, looking nervous in a way that made him seem younger. "Hi," he said, and smiled, tentative, hopeful. "Hi." The restaurant was intimate, with exposed brick and candlelight, and the kind of quiet elegance that invited conversation rather than performance. We sat by a window overlooking the river, the same river I stared at from my penthouse. But here it looked different, wilder, more alive. For the first few minutes, we were awkward. 2 strangers who shared a history only one of them could access. But slowly, carefully, we began to talk. Not about our 4 months. Not about the marriage or the sickness or the 12 years apart. Instead, we talked about who we were now. He told me about his practice, about the satisfaction he found in helping families plan for futures they hoped they'd never need, about his work with a nonprofit that provided legal services to immigrants, about the sailboat he'd bought 2 years ago and still didn't really know how to sail. I told him about my business, about the particular joy of transforming a space and seeing a client's face light up when they saw what their home could become. About my mother, and how I'd bought her the brownstone because she'd given me everything and never asked for anything back. About my terrible habit of working until 2 a.m. and forgetting to eat. "That hasn't changed," he said with a small smile. "You used to do the same thing. I'd have to physically remove your laptop and put food in front of you." I felt a pang at that. Not memory, but the ghost of care. "Did it annoy you?" "No. It made me love you more. You had this way of getting lost in your work, like nothing else existed. It was beautiful to watch." The waiter came with our food, and we ate slowly, the conversation flowing easier now. He asked about my design philosophy, and I found myself explaining things I rarely articulated. How a room should feel like an embrace, how light could change everything, how the best spaces held room for both solitude and connection. "You should write a book," he said. "The way you talk about it. People would want to read that." "I've thought about it, but it feels..." I searched for the word. "Exposing. Like I'd be revealing too much of how I see the world." "And that scares you." It wasn't a question. He said it gently, like someone who already knew the answer. "Yes," I admitted. "It scares me." Why? I set down my fork, meeting his eyes. Because if people see how I really think, how I really feel, then I'm not in control anymore. They have something they can use against me. James was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is that why you've never let anyone get close, since you woke up?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. "I don't know," I said honestly. Maybe. Or maybe I just never found anyone worth the risk. And now? I looked at him. This man who'd loved me enough to let me go, who'd waited 12 years without waiting, who was offering me not the past but the possibility of a future, and felt something shift inside my chest. "Now I'm here," I said quietly. "Trying." We left the restaurant as the sun was setting, painting the Hudson in shades of gold and rose. James walked me to my car, and we stood in the parking lot, the evening air cool against our skin. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes." "When?" I smiled, feeling something loosen inside me. "Soon." He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was so tender, so careful, that I felt tears prick my eyes. "I'm not trying to make you remember," he said softly. "I just want to know you. This version of you. The one standing in front of me right now." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Over the next 3 weeks, we saw each other 6 times. Dinner in Rhinebeck, a walk through the botanical gardens in the Bronx, coffee in a small town in Westchester where neither of us knew anyone. Each time we talked more easily. Each time the space between us felt less like a chasm and more like a bridge we were building together, plank by careful plank. He never pushed, never asked me to remember, never tried to recreate moments from those 4 months I'd lost. Instead, he let me discover him fresh, his dry sense of humor, his thoughtfulness, the way he listened like every word mattered. And I found myself falling, not remembering, but falling. For the man he was now. For the way he made me feel both seen and safe. For the possibility of being vulnerable without being diminished. On our 7th date, he took me sailing on his boat. I'd never been on a sailboat before, or if I had, I couldn't remember it. The afternoon was crystalline, the sound stretching endless and blue, and I sat beside him while he explained the basics of tacking and jibing, his hands confident on the lines. "You're good at this," I said, surprised. "I've had time to practice." He glanced at me, squinting against the sun. "Sailing teaches you patience, teaches you that you can't force the wind. You have to work with what you're given." I understood the metaphor. As we sailed back toward shore, the sun beginning its descent, I said, "I need to tell you something." He cut the engine and let the boat drift, turning to face me fully. "Okay." "I'm falling in love with you." The words came out quiet but steady. Not with who you were or who we were. With you. Now. And it terrifies me. James's eyes were bright. "Why does it terrify you? Because what if this is just, I don't know, some echo of what we had before? What if my body remembers something my mind can't access? How do I know this is real?" He reached for my hand, holding it between both of his. "Elena, I've spent 12 years wondering the same thing in reverse, wondering if what I felt for you was real or just grief for something I'd lost. And here's what I've learned. It doesn't matter. What we had before is gone. What matters is this, right now. The choice we're making to build something new. But there's still something you're not telling me," I said, the words coming from somewhere deep and instinctive. "About the money, about why your father included me in the trust, about what those 4 months really meant." His expression shifted, not closing off exactly, but becoming more guarded. And I knew, with sudden certainty, that I was right. There was more to our story. Something he'd been protecting me from. Something he thought I wasn't ready to hear. "James," I said quietly, "what aren't you telling me?" He looked out at the water, at the sun turning the waves to liquid gold, and I saw him make a decision. "You're right," he said finally. "There's more, and you deserve to know all of it." "Tell me." "Not here." He met my eyes, and I saw fear there, but also resolution. "Come to my house tomorrow. Let me show you something. And then you'll understand why those 4 months changed everything." I arrived at James's house the next afternoon, with my heart in my throat. He was waiting on the porch, and as I walked up the brick pathway, I noticed what I hadn't seen before, the care in every detail. The mums in their pots, the restored original windows, the way the house sat on its lot like it had always belonged there. "Come in," he said quietly. Inside, he led me not to the living room where we'd sat before, but upstairs, to a closed door at the end of the hall. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "Before I show you this," he said, "I need you to understand something. What we had, those 4 months, they weren't just a romance. They were a partnership. You trusted me with something you'd never trusted anyone with. And when you got sick and forgot, I promised myself I'd keep that trust, even if you never remembered." He opened the door. The room was a study, but not his study. The desk was smaller, positioned to catch the afternoon light. The walls were covered with fabric swatches, paint samples, sketches of room layouts. A drafting table stood in one corner, and on it, I saw rolled blueprints secured with a ribbon. My breath caught. "This is my office," I whispered. "From before. I packed everything the day before you were discharged from the hospital," James said. "Your mother helped me. We brought it all here because you'd been working on something important." I moved to the drafting table like I was in a dream. My hands shook as I untied the ribbon and unrolled the blueprints. They were plans for a building, not a residence, but something larger, a community center. The drawings were detailed, professional, but annotated in handwriting I recognized as my own. Notes about natural light, about creating spaces that felt welcoming rather than institutional, about how design could dignify people who'd been told they didn't matter. "I don't understand," I said. James stood beside me, close but not touching. "That summer you told me something you'd never told anyone, about your father." My chest tightened. "My father left when I was 3. He didn't just leave. He struggled with addiction. Your mother tried to help him, but he kept refusing treatment. Eventually, she had to make a choice. Keep you safe or keep trying to save him. She chose you. I'd known this, somewhere deep down, though my mother had never said it explicitly. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way it had never been before. "What does that have to do with this?" I gestured at the blueprints. "You told me that you'd spent your whole life designing beautiful spaces for wealthy people, but what you really wanted was to create something for people like your father. People who needed help, but had nowhere safe to go. You wanted to design a recovery center, a place that treated people with dignity, that didn't feel like an institution, but like a home." My eyes burned with tears I didn't understand yet. "This was your dream project," James continued softly. "You'd been sketching it for years, but you'd never told anyone because you were afraid people would think you were being sentimental, being soft. You'd built your entire brand on luxury residential design, and you thought branching out would make you seem less serious. But I told you. You told me, and I told you it was brilliant, that you could do both. The high-end residential work that paid the bills and this project that fed your soul." He moved to a filing cabinet and pulled out a folder. My father heard about it at a family dinner. You'd shown him the plans, explained your vision. He was impressed. Said he had property that might work, and he wanted to fund it. I stared at him, pieces clicking into place. The trust. The trust wasn't just money. It was funding for the project. $38 million to purchase land, build the facility, and establish an endowment so it could operate in perpetuity. He put it in your name, Elena Harrison, because he wanted you to have full control. He died before the paperwork was finalized, but his will was clear. The money is yours to complete what you started. I sank into the chair at the desk, overwhelmed. Why didn't you tell me this when I first came to your office? Because I didn't know if you'd want it. You'd built an entire life without this dream. You were successful, accomplished. Maybe that woman in the hospital bed who forgot everything. Maybe she was happier not knowing what she'd lost. That wasn't your decision to make, I said. But there was no anger in it, only understanding. I know. He crouched beside the chair so we were eye level. But I was trying to protect you, the same way I protected you by letting you go. I loved you so much that summer, Elena. You were brilliant and passionate and so damn scared of being vulnerable. And when you finally let me in, when you showed me these plans and told me about your father, I felt like I'd been given something sacred. Tears were streaming down my face now. And then I forgot it all. You forgot. But the dream didn't disappear. It's been here, waiting. And now you get to choose. Do you want to reclaim it? Or do you want to keep being the person you've been for the last 12 years? I looked around the room, at my old sketches, at the blueprints, at the evidence of a version of myself who'd been brave enough to want something that mattered more than success. And I realized that the woman I'd become and the woman I'd been weren't opposites. They were layers of the same person. I'd needed those 12 years to become strong enough, successful enough, confident enough to actually pull this off. The 25-year-old who'd dreamed this project had the passion, but not the resources or reputation. But I had both now. I want to build it, I whispered. I want to finish what I started. James's smile was radiant. Then we'll build it. Together. We? If you'll let me. Not because we're married. We're not anymore legally. But because I believe in this. I believed in it 12 years ago, and I believe in it now. And I believe in you. I reached for him then, pulling him close, letting myself be held by this man who'd loved me twice. Once in a life I couldn't remember, and once in a life we were still creating. His arms came around me, strong and steady, and I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in 12 years. Safe, seen, home. I love you, I said against his shoulder. Not the memory of loving you, just you. I love you too, he murmured. This version, the one who's brave enough to try again. We stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in a room full of old dreams and new possibilities. 6 months later, I stood at a construction site in Westchester County, watching as the frame of the recovery center took shape against a spring sky. James stood beside me, reviewing permits with the contractor. My mother was there too, wiping tears as she looked at the sign we'd just installed. The Second Chance Center for Recovery and Renewal. Your father would be proud, she said quietly. I know, I said. And I meant it. The center would open in 8 months. We'd hired a team of counselors, designers, and support staff who understood that healing required more than clinical treatment. It required beauty, dignity, and spaces that said, you matter. Every detail had been carefully considered, from the natural light in the common areas to the private gardens where people could sit and breathe. It was the best work I'd ever done. James and I weren't rushing anything. We dated slowly, deliberately, building something new rather than trying to reconstruct something old. Some nights I stayed at his house in Greenwich. Some nights he stayed at my penthouse in Manhattan. We were learning each other, not remembering, but discovering. And gradually, I was learning to trust that love didn't require perfect memory. It only required presence, choice, the willingness to be vulnerable, and the courage to try. On the drive back to the city that evening, James reached for my hand across the console. "Happy?" he asked. I thought about the question, about the woman I'd been at 25, falling in love without armor, about the woman I'd become at 26, waking up with a gap in her memory and a determination to never be vulnerable again, about the woman I was now at 37, standing in the space between who I'd been and who I was becoming. "Yes," I said. "I'm happy." And I was. After I became a millionaire, the lawyer showed me a document with my married name. But what I discovered wasn't just money or a forgotten marriage. I discovered that the life I thought I'd lost had been waiting for me all along. I discovered that some loves are patient enough to span 12 years and a gap in memory. I discovered that the strongest version of myself wasn't the one who needed no one. It was the one who was brave enough to need someone and strong enough to be needed in return. And I discovered that sometimes the greatest gift isn't remembering the past. It's having the courage to create a new future with the pieces you have left. The city lights appeared on the horizon, glittering like promises. James squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, knowing that whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. Not anymore. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.